Welcome to the Jennifer Awesome podcast. I'm your host, Jennifer Awesome, and I'm so glad that you're here. This podcast is all about meaningful conversations that challenge the way we think, inspire the way we lead, and remind us of the power of human connection. Each episode features educators, leaders, change makers, entrepreneurs, advocates, and everyday people who are making a difference in their communities and creating lasting impact. We'll explore leadership, belonging, education, personal growth, resilience, innovation, and the stories that shape who we become. My hope is that every conversation leaves you with practical ideas, fresh perspectives, and the courage to take your next step towards becoming the person you're called to be. Whether you're leading a classroom, a business, a nonprofit, or simply striving to make a difference in the lives of those around you, you're in the right place. So grab a notebook, take a deep breath, and join us as we learn, grow, and build a world where connection comes before compliance, belonging fuels success, and ordinary people create extraordinary change. Let's dive in. Thank you for tuning in to the Jennifer Awesome podcast. My name is Jenni Awesome, and today we have a special guest with us. His name is Lance Hillsinger. Lance, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Thank you, Jenni, for having me. My name's Lance Hillsinger. I'm a retired child welfare social worker, and in retirement, I've written 4 books. 2 of them are about the government system. The third is a kind of a fun book, Beyond Amelia, Lesser Known Women of Yesteryear. And then my final book, or my fourth book, is Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, A Court Investigator Examines the Gospels. So since I was a court investigator for many years, I look at the Gospels through that lens. It's to be neither hypercritical nor hyper supportive. It's just maybe a different way of people looking at the Gospels.
So tell us, how did you get into working in child protective services? How'd you get into this?
Well, my undergraduate was at UCLA. I had a dual major in psychology and political science. I'd grown up in Southern California my whole life. I had a chance to go to USC or Vanderbilt. I chose Vanderbilt in Tennessee simply because I wanted to see part of the country. And then I was on a PhD track to do research. There was a mutual decision that really the academic track was not for me. So I left Vanderbilt with a master's in psychology, returned to my native California. I was working in a shelter workshop setting. That was a sort of a mobile setting. We went out in the community too, and I was I was sort of the senior partner, and I worked with a junior partner with 6 to 8 young adults who were dual diagnosis, developmentally delayed, and some sort of mental health diagnosis. A very unique population.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I like to tell this story because the junior partner wasn't paid. I wasn't paid very much, and the junior partner was paid even less. And so there was quite a bit of turnover in that position. And when one time I got paired with a person who just one of those people that I said green, she would say red. And, I was a senior partner, so I think I said it's green if I say so, kind of because I'm a senior partner and I had the master's degree and, but just one of those things. But one day she said, why don't we get Dale, that was one of the guys in the group, a job as a dishwasher in the county cafeteria. And I was about to say, that's a really, and then I realized that is a good idea. I was about to say no, because so many other times it had been confrontational. So this was in the pre-internet days. We took a little field trip down to the Hall of Administration in LA. And there was everything between arborist and zookeeper in this huge book for civil service jobs in LA County. Fortunately, children's services worker came before a dishwasher, and I got a job for myself.
So what have been some of the things you've experienced in being a child social worker? What have you, what are some of the highlights? What are some of the things that maybe we're not aware of for people who may want to look into that profession in the future?
Well, let me just finish this story really briefly.
Okay.
I was a child welfare worker in LA County for 5 years. My parents were planning to retire up in San Luis Obispo. My wife and I, we took a trip up here kind of to have a nice weekend. We wound up putting in a down payment on a house that was not yet even constructed, hoping I would get a job. The county there was said social worker four. So I thought they were hiring four social workers. I thought it was unusual that use Roman numerals, but
Mhm.
that was the classification. In LA County, it only went up to three as far as the civil service systems. Three is better than one, and that kind of thing. And so I was fortunate to get the job. My wife was able to get a job with the National Guard. So my 29 years with San Luis Obispo County, which is halfway between, it was just north of Santa Barbara.
Okay.
So for most of my career, I was a court worker. Um, and that is in the legal system. I think a lot of people think that, oh, CPS just takes kids and that's what we want and that's what we're doing. And you can find all sorts of horrible things on the internet about bad mouthing us and everything. But one of the things I like to point out, if of every 1,000 phone calls to the hotline, less than one results in a termination of parental rights. We're
Mhm.
not out there to take kids. Now, most of the time when there's a referral or a case, it doesn't need to go to court. It's either
Right.
unfounded or you can't prove it or it's not serious enough. Only the most serious situations, and the codes in California defines what those serious situations are. Can you remove a child? And you don't even have to remove a child to have court intervention. That's one of the things that I advocated for. Sometimes, hey, this family's in crisis here. Mom's dabbling in drugs, but it's not really that bad yet. So let's intervene and just maintain the kids in the home.
Yeah.
Sometimes that fell on deaf ears when I was trying to advocate for that. But that's called a non-detained petition in California. It's out of custody orders in other states.
Mhm.
So I would write the report from uh, when the child was moved for the detention hearing, which is held in 3 days, and then the jurisdictional dispositional hearing, which was normally held in about 5 weeks. The jurisdiction is what happened. The disposition is what are we going to do. The time between the detention hearing and the jurisdictional disposition hearing varies quite a bit by state. And
Yes,
you
it
can
does.
often have continuances and things like that. And so that's why you have to and you have to have under California law, you have to clear and convincing evidence. You can say X happened. There's evidence that this happened, but it still has to rise to a very fairly high legal standard of clear and convincing evidence that it's better for the child to be out of the home. And the roughly two-thirds of the cases that come into the court system are uh, neglect due to parent substance abuse.
Mhm.
Very, very rarely did I have what I call a pure physical abuse case. The code section in California has two sections. The 300A, which is just your sort of your generic physical abuse, any age of child, whatever, and 300E for a child. Originally, it was under three. Now it's the code is under five, where there's really something very seriously brutal. Somebody who's really brutalized a child. And if you have a sustained count under 300E of the Welfare Institution Code, you don't even have to give the parents a chance. So that's that's where we and so that would be my job is the detention report and to write the petition, which is the legal language by which a judge here's are the facts. That's the detention hearing, what we believe the facts to be, and here's the code, how this code section applies to those facts in like a paragraph form. So
So what would your
and it
caseload look like? How many of these, petitions would you have at a time?
well, you only have really Uh, hopefully, you only have one petition to write at a time because there's a very, very tight deadline.
Right.
Because you're supposed to file within 24 hours. Your boss needs some time to review it and check it and make sure and answer any questions. And then physically, it has to get to the courthouse to be physically filed. I think it's now done electronically in most states, but back then it wasn't. It wasn't electronic. So it's a very time crunch. The only time you might have two at once is a sibling case. You
Gotcha.
might have
Mhm.
you might have siblings. Some states have individual cases for each sibling, even if they're full siblings.
Mhm.
Or you might have two women who are living together. They each have children. The facts are very similar, but the children are only related to one mom, and some children are related to them. So you might have one worker handle both cases because the facts are similar. But it's only
Yeah.
time you can generally handle one petition, two petitions at a time.
Okay.
When I had LA County, I had cases. Now you have the dispositional hearing, which is where you can dismiss the case at any type along the way. You can also grant new custody orders. Very often, if you have a non-offending father, you can take jurisdiction, give him custody, and dismiss the
Hmm.
case that way. Um, and then you have the dispositional hearing, and then typically the parent has 12 months to reunify. There's some
Hmm.
other changes in that. There's some exceptions and whatever, but generally most cases fall under the 12-month rule. And then for like the last 4 years in LA County, I was both kind of a court worker for a little bit and also had an ongoing cases, those post dispositional cases. And I had 77, to go back to answer your question. I had 77 children in my caseload. You're supposed to
Wow.
visit every child once a month
Yeah.
at least, and
Yeah.
with 77 kids, that's almost a physical impossibility, especially when the child might be placed with a relative in another part of the county.
Hmm.
I don't know how familiar you are with geography. The mother, it's usually the custodial parent, which is 99 times out of 100 is the mother. That's where you base the case from, and
Right.
because that's where you're hoping to return the children to. But I had a case where I had to drive out to the desert, Lancaster, and it was a full day trip for me to see the child out there, or LA
Yeah.
traffic going the other way. I had a couple of cases, and so there's a lot of driving involved especially if
Yeah.
you're in a rural area.
Yeah. And
So
if
I
you
was
have
talking,
77 kids on your caseload, that's more than 2 kids a day you would need to see in a whole
yeah,
month.
yeah,
That's a lot.
right. So yeah, that was ridiculous. The system has improved now. I think the
Good.
system is a little more selective about the number of children entering foster care. You know, nobody wants a headline case and not have a case. Okay, we didn't take this case to court. Then tomorrow you have a dead child or something, and then it's on the morning news. CPS.
Yeah.
We don't want that either.
Yeah.
Um, but then typically I would have, oh, 20 kids in my caseload, some that are just coming in and some that are just about to have their disposition hearing, and scattered in between those two extremes. But I work just as hard, even though people ask, well, how many kids? I work
Yeah.
much harder in San Luis Obispo because there are a lot of LA was just simply driving from A to B. And
Yeah.
and that's one of the points. One of the points you'll say, oh, the system is this and it needs to be reformed. It needs this and that. A lot of people. The one thing that makes the system work is if there's foster parents. If the
Mhm.
social worker has to drive an hour to the foster home and back, that's a 2-hour trip.
Mhm.
If there's a foster home within 15 minutes, that's only a half-hour round trip. That's much better.
Yeah.
So that's the one thing. And that's why I wrote one of the reasons I wrote my first book, In Place of the Parent Inside Child Protective Services, to urge people to become foster parents, or what are called CASA workers, guardian ad litem, people who non-attorneys who represent children in court.
And I
We
wanna
also
say
in
that
California, we also sorry.
in Washington, I went through the CASA training, I went through the guardian ad litem training, and, I absolutely recommend it to anybody. I mean, being able to understand how the system works and how to advocate for children, it's a huge area that we could add more people.
Yeah. When the CASA program first started, I found it an annoyance because if they were making the same recommendation I made, I find it redundant. And if they were not, didn't agree with me, then that made my job a lot more difficult. But over
Yeah.
time, especially in San Luis Obispo County, I found it mutually, we work together. Generally, any two agencies are going to have little friction. But by and large, it was a complementary relationship, and I'm still Facebook friends with a CASA worker I used to work with. So there we are.
Nice. Nice. So you were talking about the first book and how you were advocating that you saw a need that there weren't as many foster families, so you wrote this book to fill in that gap. So tell us a bit about your book and why being a foster family is so important.
Well, there's 3 reasons. One is to encourage to be a foster parent or a foster worker. 2 was just to educate people about the system. There's a lot of
Mhm,
misinformation and, uh, for instance, when kids enter foster care, we tend to your mind thinks non-relative, but actually foster care covers both relative and non-relative placement.
mhm.
And it's roughly split 50-50 nationwide in rough terms. Half the children are placed with relatives and half are in non-related homes that are licensed foster homes.
Mhm.
And even if it's a relative, there has to be an approval. We have to check everybody's criminal record in the home, make sure the home is physically safe, that kind of thing.
Yep.
Um, and then the other thing is when I noticed during my career, there was more and more paperwork. I was spending more and more screen time and less true face time with clients.
Mhm.
And that's what I want to rally against is that there's always been a lot of paperwork, and it should be because you've got need a lot of accountability and everything. But at some point, it takes away from the joy of doing the job, and it takes away from the focus of the job. I
Yeah.
talk about structured decision making. There's a thing that you have to do to say, okay, this is how I want to process my decision. And if you don't do X before you do Y, the computer tells you get a little ding that your supervisor has to talk to you about. That means you're working the system, the computer system, and not working with clients. So this is one of the beefs I had here is that we need to get back and let people do their job, um, and not burden them so much with so much paperwork. Yes,
Yeah.
the system needs to be held accountable, but at some point, people are not going to put forth that extra effort. They're going to just think of themselves as bureaucrats and not social workers.
Yeah, it's the relational piece that I mean, in a lot of our jobs that we get into and, inundating us with paperwork doesn't do anyone any good.
And this is my daughters are both teachers, and my
Mhm.
mother was a teacher. And I know that my daughter has to do a lot more paperwork as a teacher than my mother had to do. And, it's like, you have to check a box. Did this meet the core standard? Did this meet this objective? And as opposed to, hey, I think kids, we ought to study, George Washington this week or whatever, and be
Yeah.
enthusiastic and plan, you know, decorate the classroom or whatever you would do as a teacher. I don't know, but you would be enthusiastic about the classroom if you got to really say, hey, okay, this time. And I understand in Finland, which has,
Mm.
they're very educated, very literate and all those things, is that the teachers are given a fair amount of latitude,
Yeah.
and to teach how they want, and they want it with kids that do well, and
I
teachers
would
who are
say that
excited about going to work.
that's why kids enjoy school and that's why teachers want to teach is that fun aspect of look at this fun activity we get to do together. So you're right. And I can see that too with being a social worker too is it's that relational piece where you're actually connecting with your clients, a clientele and hopefully getting a better place for the kids and helping as many families as possible so that they can parent their kids. That's what I hear you
Yeah,
saying.
and it was a very gratifying job. I'm very, very grateful. I had an uncle who was a corporate lawyer. He made a lot more money than I did. My dad was a lawyer, a family lawyer. He probably made more money too, but I think that I had a very meaningful job. You recommend to a court that somebody not even get a second chance with their kid. That's a heavy, heavy thing.
Yeah.
And though sometimes when you saw people start to succeed, that was what I felt really good, especially as a court worker, that you kind of set the stage. Some cases you knew going in, they're serious, the program is so serious that there's really no question that the court will take dependency. But you do set the stage for the people to recover it. And some did, not everyone. But well, those that did, it was very, very grateful. San Luis Obispo is a small county. Well, occasionally I used to run into clients. I haven't had that happen for a while now, but um, it's a very gratifying appearance when, that happens.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about your other books. I mean, you've got 4 books out now?
That's right, and, so the first one is, uh, In Place the Parent, Inside Child Protective Services. The second one is Build a Better Bridge, Social Policy for the 21st Century. Um, Roughly 90% of the children, at least in San Luis Obispo County, and I think that's generally true in most of California, are poor enough to qualify for court-appointed counsel. So there's a link between poverty and child maltreatment. Yes, you could have
Mhm.
somebody in Beverly Hills or whatever, but that's very much the exception.
Mhm.
We deal with people who are generally very poor and not very successful in school or life in general. And then particularly the men. Um, and why was our society producing so many men that are not successful either as fathers or as employees? So I kind of look at the
Mm.
welfare programs, the war on poverty programs, and how there's also a lot of misinformation there about this, and veterans don't get benefits, blah, blah, blah. No, veterans have priority in public housing. A disabled veteran has the highest priority. If anybody's watching your podcast, if you know a homeless veteran, just have them bring their proof of honorable discharge to the local Veterans Affairs office, and that person will help them get some housing.
Excellent.
Um, so that's what I think of. What can we do in our society to change the rules to incent? For one of the examples is food stamps.
Mhm.
Food stamps is calculated by household income and size of household. That sounds normal, but two senior citizens don't eat as much food as a mom and a teenage son.
Yeah, definitely not.
And so why don't we make, food stamps age adjusted?
Yeah.
That's just one simple thing. Then the other thing is that boys are not successful in school. And by and large, and I sat on the school attendance review board, and educators generally agreed with this, is that they don't really boys like to read true stories.
Mhm.
They don't like to read fiction. They're very turned off by fiction. So my advocate in the book is one little small change that would cost anything. Instead of requiring 4 years of English, which is largely fictional reading,
Right.
require 1 year of a nonfiction reading. And that will help. And the other thing that I advocate again, because I know that there are people who don't want the government to spend one extra penny than it has to, just require school districts to post graduation rates by gender, because in some areas the dropout rate is 25%. With
Yeah.
boys almost always being worse than girls, and an African American boy or Hispanic boy, their graduation
Mm.
rates are even lower.
Yeah,
So,
especially for the
that's
boys that have to go out and support their families. Yeah.
right. And one point I make is that a boy who doesn't graduate high school, or let's say a girl who doesn't graduate, she's more likely to get pregnant.
Yeah.
Statistically, not
Yeah.
everybody, but when you're setting social policy, you have to talk about the statistics. She's
Yes.
more likely to get pregnant, go on aid, and she's an economic drag on the society.
Yep.
That's in cold business terms. The boy, the young man who doesn't graduate high school, he's more likely to drift into criminal activity and also father a child he can't support. But his
Mhm.
failure to graduate is not just a drag on him, it's a matter of public safety.
Yeah, those are
Yeah,
huge
so we
points.
really need to emphasize this, and I can't. My bugaboo is that how many men are portrayed in commercials these days. I've subscribed to Science News, and if you see the articles, the ads in for science, almost all of them feature a young woman going off on a science career, or men and women pursuing science
Yeah.
careers. Rarely you will see an ad for a man pursuing a science career at a college or some other program. And I think that has to change. We have to encourage that. Yes, there are relatively few women in with the hard sciences, but we also need to encourage everybody.
Yeah.
Uh, more with more women are by far more women are becoming veterinarians,
Mhm.
psychologists, optometrists, ophthalmologists, lawyers, doctors.
Yes.
So that we have a real shift there in our society, and I think that men need a little more encouragement. So that's one of the things. Some of the things I talk about in the book. Others is just about the history of welfare, how things have encouraged, and these kind of structural changes. Like maybe we should encourage companies to um, help employees buy housing. Um,
Mhm.
in World War II, there was the GI after World War II. There's a GI Bill, and tens of thousands of men and
Mhm.
families got house in Levittown. It
Yeah.
was largely built on the GI Bill, almost everyone. But the cost of housing at Levittown has increased like 5 times the inflation rate.
Oh,
So it's
yeah.
much more harder to buy a home now. And, why don't we have the equivalent of a GI Bill for firefighters, for teachers, for
Yeah, we
police
should.
officers? Have
Yeah.
something like that, or some sort of. It's very expensive here to live in San Luis Obispo, Santa Barbara County. Homes routinely are $1 million.
Mhm.
And even if you pay a police officer 100,000 a year, you can't afford them. Very hard to afford down payment on $1 million home. And so it's difficult to attract housing. We had a little scandal here. The superintendent of schools
Mhm.
got a kind of a sweetheart deal. The old superintendent was retiring. They hired somebody. He got a sweetheart deal for a second mortgage to afford it. Even the superintendent of school needed a little help
Oh,
financially.
yeah.
I'm all for that if it was for all school employees. Singling
Yeah.
out the superintendent, I think, was unfair.
Well, and we want our
So
workforce to be in our community. That was a huge
right,
thing. Like teachers, we want them to be a part of the community, not the
that's
community
right.
that's half an hour away. We want them to be part of
Yeah,
the heart of the people they work with.
that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. So to talk briefly about my other two books, Beyond Amelia, Lesser Known Women of Yesteryear. I will fair
Mhm.
disclosure here. I wrote a book that I thought would be attractive to women because women buy more books,
Mhm.
especially fiction. Something like 75-80% of books are bought by women or
Mhm.
girls.
Yeah.
And so I thought, well, it's a nonfiction title, but I thought something about that. And it's a lighthearted book. It's what I call an airport book, something you could read while you're waiting for a plane to take off, but you might learn a little history and a little insight about. And it talks about how it's more complex, the history. There's been a lot of men who have supported women through history. Um, so this is where it's not always that. So that's what I talk about that book. And then
Nice.
I've always had faith. I think faith helped me be a better social worker.
Mhm.
Sometimes when I would make out a home call, particularly if the person was a little more challenging, I might park a block or two away, meditate for a while, maybe say a
Yep.
prayer, but more often just kind of settle myself down, meditate, be in the right mindset, and tap in as I said, like the air conditioning in the office, the faith is there in the background. When it's not working, you really notice. But,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
so that's where I wrote my other book because very, very few of my families, I can almost count on two hands the number of families had a, a sustained connection to an organized religion.
Mhm.
And faith helps people get through the challenges of life. Faith helps people not to hate themselves because a lot of drug uses. I feel bad about myself, and oh, gee, if I take this, I'm going to feel good at least for a little while. And
Yeah.
people who attend church, of course, there's exceptions, but you're not going to find as many drug addicts and alcoholics and things like that. And people are going to
That's
lead
true.
physically healthier lifestyles. And so it's encouraged me, but it's very much what I call in social work the soft sell. And what I mean by that is that I would tell new workers, we don't want to be used car salesmen talking with clients. Hey, you got to do this, your case plan. Hey, this is your case plan. These are your children, your choice. You make it a
Mhm.
soft sell about how do you see it a year from now? Do you see yourself living with your kids? Um, and sometimes people say, "Okay, I realize I'm not going to make it. I'm not going to fight it. I'm going to let let the foster parents have the kids, or I'm going to let my aunt or my cousin or whatever." And they realize that they're just not. And I admired that because you don't want to. Now I want to encourage people to get treatment. I don't get me wrong, but some people have like, yeah, okay, that's where I am.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
yeah,
and I'll
so
I'll, sh- I'll share that my stepdaughters uh went through something similar. They've all turned 18. They're all grown and out of the house now. However, when they first came into my life, their mother was going back and forth with drugs, and she ended up making the hard decision that you know not being in their lives, going and taking care of herself was the best thing for them. And so having that conversation with them again and again and saying, you know what, your mom didn't abandon you. She loves you. She's loving you the best that she can from a distance. And she made the hardest decision that she had to, and that was to put you guys first. And in this case, that didn't include her in your lives at that time. Now she's back in their lives. She's able to be a part of their lives. But up until the point where they all turned 18, she was down doing what she needed to do to take care of herself.
And that's a noble, and we ought to recognize that that's a noble thing to do,
Yeah.
and not put somebody down because that they did the noble act. So, yes,
Yeah.
that's a very common scenario in child welfare. And
Yeah.
so that's why I read the books. I wanted to have do something meaningful in my retirement.
Yeah.
Um, my first book, all the proceeds go to Razom, a humanitarian program in Ukraine.
That's wonderful.
Um,
Can you tell us a bit more about that? The program?
well, they just provide, basic necessities, nothing, humanitarian assistance, food, medical care, um, that kind of thing, and that they're approved by, not approved, but according to Charity Navigator and other people, they're a legitimate charity. There's certain charities that are recognized by the State Department that are legitimate. The money goes to good uses, so they've been vetted,
Mhm.
and there's certainly a great need there. Um, and I think that it tends to be forgotten, it's yesterday's news too often. We got a war going on in another part of the country. Ukraine gets the page 13, kind of
Yeah.
thing. But their suffering is still true. No, there's lots of, it's just a place where I chose to support. There's lots of worthy causes, but
Mhm.
I wanted to do something for that. I have one, not so much personal connection, but I'm a Mason, a
Okay.
Freemason,
Yeah, yeah.
and 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 I mentioned this guy. We're not supposed to use our affiliation, Masonic affiliation, to promote a business, but this is writing is simply a hobby. Like I said, I donate the royalties, so I feel I'm safe under Masonic rules to share the story. Um, Before and Russia invaded, I looked at the Grand Lodge of Ukraine's website. It was a typical website, this is our
Mhm.
Grand Master, and this is this and this. And then, right just at the invasion, I looked again. The Russians attacked it very clearly. There was all these lies and everything, and false information. I thought I felt kind of violated. Hey, the Russians have taken over the Masons.
Oh,
But I was
no.
also proud that they thought, hey, the Russians think we're important enough to be taken over. And and then, a couple of years ago, I checked that the website's back up, and it looks at first sight to be all normal and everything. You can see in English or Ukrainian, but it doesn't list people's names. It doesn't list times when there's meetings, all security
Oh.
things.
Oh,
So that
wow.
really kind of hit home that really is, um, still people who still have to live on it's wartime there, and the children suffer and the families suffer, and whatever we can
Mhm.
do to, give a little solace to something. I think that people need hope. Sometimes that's yes, and maybe just a little trickle in a huge necessary bucket, but it does give people hope, and I think that that's what good social worker is. You
Yeah.
give people hope for a better day.
Yes, you do. So on that note, Lance, you have done some amazing things. You have some amazing perspectives, and I'm so grateful that you're sharing this with the world and you've got those books out there. Do you have plans for any more insights, any more books in your retirement?
For the moment, I'm written out. I've dabbled with a fiction book, but no, for the moment I'm written out. I have a soon to be 4-year-old grandchild, and I'm enjoying that.
Oh,
And so that's good. And just
that's
so your listeners know, I have a website, lancehillsinger.net. You can get more information about me and Razom, and there's a short little video too that I've about the foster care system.
well, excellent. Well, Lance, any last words for our listeners today?
Just thank you, Jenny, for having me, and I hope people enjoy this program, and I hope they check out the website.
All right. Well, thank you for tuning in to the Jennifer Awesome podcast. My name is Jenni Awesome, and I hope you have a fantastic day.